Today we have a very reputed artist with us, Orijit Sen ji. He is a graphic novelist, often called to be India's first graphic novelist, and a satirist and a cartoonist, and who has been using humor as a very powerful political weapon. And his works have always been very political as well. So he has done several projects in India and internationally. So welcome to this interview, and I would like to uh, start this session by asking about your first graphic novel, which is often called as India's first graphic novel, River of Stories. So when it comes to River of Stories, uh, decades have passed, and in the beginning you had tough challenges to market it. So, and you have been involved in developing comics and graphic novels in India. So, what is the current scenario of graphic novels and comics in India?
Um, First of all, thank you, Noushad, for bringing me here and giving me an opportunity to talk about these things. In response to your question, I would say that yes, I was perhaps uh, my book, The River of Stories, was um, uh, came out in 1994, and at that time, the medium itself was not known. I would not say not known, as in to say it was associated with a certain kind of literature for children. And also, it was not seen as something, as a medium that can address deeper or more serious or socially relevant issues. It was generally understood to be a form that provides cheap and throwaway entertainment for children. This, of course, is let's say a misunderstanding of the potential of the medium. So when I grew up, we used to all read comics because, in some ways, this is before the time that television really had a spread in India, and of course there was no internet. So for us growing up, comics were the only form of visual literature or narratives that we could have, and we were all, when I say we, I mean my friends, my generation of kids, uh, were all obsessed with comics. We used to collect comics, we used to barter, exchange, all these things. So, however, I started to draw comics while I was still in school, just making short stories about my life or things that interested my friends. And I used to take part in this barter where I could actually draw some 2-3 page comics and then exchange it for a phantom comic or something which I wanted to read from my friend. So it became something that from an early age, I think uh, I got very involved with the medium and in trying to tell my own kind of stories through it. So, however, when I got inspired when I was in design school, I studied at the National Institute of Design, and there in the library and other places, I came across at that time in the 1980s the first important and graphic novel that became successful globally was Art Spiegelman's Mouse. And this told his story of, or rather his father's parents' story of the Holocaust and as Jews what they went through. And this caught the imagination of the public. It went on to win a Pulitzer Prize, and it also Art Spiegelman was featured on the cover of Time magazine. So when all this happened, I knew that my interest and involvement with comics was uh, mm, not something just childish. I mean, I was always convinced that it's a medium that we can do more with, except that perhaps the sort of prominence that something like Mouse gained internationally gave me it sort of gave me a sense of vindication that yes, this is what I want to do and this is what a kind of thing. So I came out with River of Stories in 1994. I started working on it in 91. It took me about 3 years because there was no funding or nothing like that. So I was doing it on my own steam and also trying to make a living, otherwise doing other projects and all that. So when it came out, there was actually no response. People didn't know what this medium is and what happens to it. So I would say yes. So when it came out in '94, I was expecting it would receive, it would be a very new thing and people would get bowled over by it. But actually, that did not happen. Nobody was interested, and nobody didn't. Even booksellers, I used to take copies to the bookshops, and they would say, "No, but what is this? Is this for children or is it for?" But if it's for children, the story is not very good, exciting for children. It's not even color, etc., etc. So it slowly, the whatever first edition sold out from my own. Luckily, my wife and I, we run a small store which had a bookstore section and also crafts and design store. So little by little, we sold out from our own shop, but mostly there was no response to it. So I'm saying that at the beginning, that was the situation. Today, the contrast is huge. So it's going to be 2024. So maybe let's say 3 decades since time that River Stories was first launched. The situation has changed dramatically. There's a huge readership, and and more young people are getting interested in the medium. The medium is being used to in both, in not just in terms of as as a space for readers of comics to enjoy in the like literature or something, but also in an educational space. The people are using comics to talk about political, social, and other issues with a younger audience. And now, when I say young audience, I don't mean children necessarily, children also, but also like young adults, like teenagers and young adults. Comics has become a very strong and much liked medium, and more people are experimenting with the medium in terms of creating new kinds of work. So I would say there's been a huge shift, and mainstream publishers like Penguin and HarperCollins and others in India are publishing comics and graphic novels now. In '94, I had no publishers; nobody was interested. Bookstores display, they have sometimes they have separate sections for graphic novels. So I would say that the change is massive, and there are young people now doing something known as the indie comics movement, which is literally young people producing their own comics, not even waiting for a publisher or going to a publisher, but bringing it out themselves, marketing it online, doing these comics festivals as a collective exercise. Recently, there was, so it's been happening in different cities, this Indie Comics Fest. I think the next one is coming up in Bombay, but the previous one was in Kochi. I think Kochi had, so even in Kerala and other places. So I think it's becoming more and more a kind of a powerful tool of social commentary, of creative expression. And yeah, so I would say the change is like huge. It's a heaven and hell kind of change.
So when it comes to vernacular languages, what is the situation? For instance, in Malayalam, we used to have Aravindan and Toms.
Yes, yes.
So what about the Indian vernacular languages?
I think there are comics happening in vernacular languages and also in mixed languages now, in the sense that a mix of English and Hindi, or Bangla and English. Like in Kerala, there were, as you mentioned, there was Toms, there's Aravindan, and the culture of political cartoons particularly has been quite strong in Kerala. And political cartoons may be short pieces that appear in newspapers, but many people have taken that form. Unni is another example, who have taken that form into a longer narrative. Sometimes it could be non-fiction also. Like Unni's book on Kochi was an example. And I would say that the form has spread into different types of. It's not just comics as we understand in terms of frame by frame narratives. There are different kinds. People have explored many different ways of telling stories through visual medium. So graphic novels or comics are really terms that define a certain genre within this larger idea of, let's say, visual narrative. There's so many forms that are being explored now, and also because of the online, they have come. The comics and graphic novels have started appearing online, and the online medium itself uh, kind of encourages the development of new ways of because there are different kind of interactivity possible online, which does not exist on print and paper. So I think the medium is growing into many different forms, and many different creators are using it in different ways. So even in the vernacular press, I see Kerala is one example, and Bengal is another one, where there's always been a lot of Bengali comics. There are people like Narayan Devnath who have done amazing work over the years in creating comics for young people and for children. I grew up reading some of his Nonte Ponte and about these two naughty kids. They have always been popular. They're still popular, and there are more creators coming up with Bangla comics even as we speak. So I would say that in terms of vernacular spaces, certain languages like Malayalam and Bangla and even Hindi to an extent, Hindi being very widespread. So there are many different kinds of Hindi literature, so to speak, and within that there is now kind of a interest and awareness of comics coming up, and people creating in the medium also. I'm not aware of, they may be in other languages as well. I mean, I went to Ladakh and I met, for the Ladakh Literature Festival, and I met a group of young Ladakhi comics creators. I'm not sure if they were, most of their work appeared to be at this point in English, but it was very much coming out of the Ladakhi sensibility. And they were talking about Ladakhi kind of stories. Linguistically, perhaps they are, as far as I could see, they were still working with English. But that's okay, because I think the point is, finally, when we say vernacular in literature, say non-graphic literature, in literature which is, their language is paramount because that is the medium. But the graphic form has both image and text, and image is equally important, perhaps more important in the graphic form, and therefore an image has no language. So therefore, for us to understand vernacularity in graphic form, it has to be a bit different from our understanding of vernacularity in literature. People may be creating work which is coming from specific cultural context and background. Uh, they may use English or a mix of languages even. However, the point is that the work speaks of a certain culture and is coming from a certain experience in a certain culture. Like I'm giving the example of Ladakh. I would still consider that vernacular, even though it may use English or a mix of Ladakhi and English, but I would still consider it Ladakhi in its very essence and its very sort of soul. So I would say that we need to understand vernacularity in graphic literature in a slightly different frame of reference than what we do with literature.
So the visual language itself changes, you want to say?
Yes, visual language changes. Visual language, again, in terms of the way stories are told, the way they are structured, the characters and what they express, and of course the backgrounds. There's a very rich sort of a repertoire of elements that the moment you bring in the visual that come into it. I mean, you're able to describe or to describe experiences in a very different way than when you're doing it only through words. So there's a texture of visuality, visual language, the way you structure your stories, the way you frame them. There's so many aspects to it, which makes it very special or unique or particular. And many of these, I'm again talking right now still of the Ladakhi people I met, artists. So many of them have studied in Delhi University, or they've gone out somewhere to study, have returned to Ladakh, and now from outside Ladakh, they have brought in certain knowledge and tools and understanding, which was not available to them in Ladakh, but they are bringing it back into their own culture. And that is how cultures always grow, through a transformative process of imbibing, of assimilating of, and I see that process goes on with comics quite interestingly.
So, since this is a very powerful narrative art form, how does the right wing in India use it? In the sense that, particularly the mythological traditions, the mythological tales, to for ideological indoctrination among kids, particularly. What is your take on that?
I would say it all began with Amar Chitrakatha. This was the most popular comics when it came out when I was a kid. I remember the very first issues coming out at that time. Mm, I would say it's a sort of a soft indoctrination process. At that time, in particular, it was. Uh, the whole idea of kind of Hindu majoritarianism wasn't really even a thing. People didn't talk about it, and there wasn't. It wasn't kind of a part of a concern as such. Although it was very much there. RSS has been around for a long time. However, it was much more subterranean, not in the mainstream of the dialogue as it is today. And I think Amar Chitrakatha, interesting thing is that when we were children, we our parents and teachers frowned upon comics. They thought this was all distracting us from the more important things, and they were very uh, mm, as in to say, they didn't have a they would spoil our reading habits, and that they wanted us to study obviously more serious things. So comics were generally looked upon, however, because we loved them, and because so it was like we would be given limited pocket money to so that it was rationed. We could, and this is where the barter system started, because I would buy Mandrake, my friend would buy Phantom, and we only had money to buy one, and then we would exchange, barter, whatever, so that we could access more. So when Amar Chitrakatha came in, I remember as a kid, thinking that how come parents and teachers are not so against uh, comics when it comes to Amar Chitrakatha. They would not like us to read Phantom and Mandrake or whatever else we were reading, superhero, whatever. But if they saw us reading Amar Chitrakatha, they would be okay, all right. They were even willing to uh, buy us Amar Chitrakatha regularly. So I could already see this difference in the attitude towards something which is considered. Mainly, I know from my parents, it was a matter of saying that, oh, my father was a cartographer. He used to get transferred from place to place, and we never grew up in Bengal. Neither did we have access to the joint family of grandmothers and storytellings, others. We were quite cut off that way from our culture, as in to say, when I say our, what they felt was like the Bengali culture of literature, and also perhaps some of the mythological stories and all that, which is generally the role of the extended family to kind of bring forward. My father was always on tour, and my mother was busy raising the three of us, me and my two brothers, on her own. So there wasn't that much time for that kind of storytelling. So I think they thought that, oh, these comics, they will read these comics and they will imbibe something of their own culture through these comics. Which at one level is okay, but I would say that there's also the lower, which I see now, of course, at that time, but there's this sort of agenda of spreading Hindu sort of stories, mythology, which is also fine. I don't see anything wrong with mythological stories of any religion. But if you notice with Amar Chitrakatha, they always eschewed all the others. I mean, it was very focused on Hindu stories, Hindu gods, uh, which is where the problem started, where it was like saying that this is Indian. These stories and these gods and these characters, and then they've carried on from the mythologicals to even the sort of national heroes and freedom fighters. They slowly went from Hindu, but always the definition was usually Hindu upper caste leaders who would be portrayed by their selection. So what is important about Amar Chitrakatha is not what they brought out, which is good, but more important to consider what they did not, what they left out. That is very telling. And I would say that this soft approach of sort of building in a idea of India which excludes so many other kind of cultures and people and focuses on only the majority, is where the idea of comes from. This idea of India is a Hindu nation or whatever it is. So that's where comics have been used from Amar Chitrakatha onwards. I know that today much more rabid things are also being done, not just but those rabid things somehow, at the moment, what I'm aware of, exist on. They need very viral kind of spread. So they focus on the internet. They focus on multimedia, which can go online and be shared and all that. I don't think they look at as yet comics as being something which can have that kind of a spread. I may be mistaken. There may be some individual issues or books or comics that have been brought out about the more rabid idea of Hinduism, but I'm not aware of that. It remains within the soft Hindutva kind of a
All right.
space.
Yeah, since we are right now talking, sitting in Kerala, so could you say something about a Travancore tale that you did about Nangeli?
Yeah,
Briefly, could you elaborate on it?
yeah. That was, I think, 2016, if I'm not mistaken, or 17. I was initially asked by a British art magazine called Art Asia to contribute a story about something. It was up to me, anything to do with India that they wanted to, because it was a issue that they had an India kind of a theme. I had around that time been reading about this Nangeli story. I was very moved by this kind of. To me, I'm interested in, let's say, I would consider Nangeli as a part of a kind of folklore, because we don't have enough. I did enough research to try to figure out there isn't a lot of secondary evidence that supports the existence of what happened. I mean, that Nangeli actually reacted in this way, that there was this person. But to me, the fact that there is no records from the British administration of her time, which lists or anywhere mentions that such a incident happened or so on. To me, that doesn't matter so much, because maybe it did happen, maybe it did not, maybe it's an exaggeration, maybe whatever it may be. Maybe there are other circumstances around it which we are unaware of, whatever it might be. To me, the fact that this story has stayed in the popular imagination and consciousness and has been told and retold and becomes like a part of an oral tradition also. And today, of course, we know that many people have used this story even within a political discourse. Anyway, so I'm always interested in stories, not whether they are true or not, but they are, to me, the truth lies in the fact that people own them and the people talk about them. And to me, that makes it true. The actual events doesn't matter. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a historian. So I take full liberty of that. So I researched her story and her background. And then I decided to kind of make this her story. I've been wanting to do that when this journal asked me to do a short story about it. I decided I'll choose this story. I did that I was very conscious of the fact that I, as perhaps an outsider to Kerala, as a upper caste person talking about a Dalit woman's struggle, that I need to be respectful and I need to address it with as much, while letting my imagination come in. I mean, as an artist, if you cannot enter into another person's reality empathetically, then you, as a storyteller artist, you cannot really tell good stories. I mean, the whole point of art is to allow ourselves to enter into somebody else's head, so to speak, literally. So I kind of created this, my version of a fictional character, Nangeli, based on all that I had understood. I had been to Kerala once or twice before that. So I had a kind of visual imagination of how the story should look. Um, and The thing is that in the story, the Irava community were supposedly not allowed to cover, the women were not allowed to cover their breasts. Um, and So I wanted to, obviously, visually, I did not want to bypass that or try to cover up something which was uh, the truth of the matter. However, within that context, there is this girl Nangeli who insists on covering her breast. And so, through the whole telling of that story, even when she finally has to take off her top cover and then she cuts her breasts off, that whole episode, the way I've shown, we never see what the tax collector wants to see is her breast. We, the reader, never get to see that because that whole episode happens from behind Nangeli's back. We're looking at from the back, and the collectors are facing us. So I use this device, but I wanted to make it very real, very visceral, because violence against Dalits is something very real and carries on till today. I didn't want to, I didn't want to sort of, stylize it or make it poetic. I just wanted to be very real and very disturbing. And so I drew it in a very, very real way. And the only time we see Nangeli's breast is when it's actually cut off and it's lying in a pool of blood with spatters of blood. I wanted obviously to be something that would shock people, and it did. However, it didn't appear in that magazine for some reason. They had some delays on their schedules, and they decided not to do that India feature. Something, I don't know, whatever. They did not finally publish it, but a couple of Indian web zines, they picked it up, including this Indian Cultural Forum, and then a Northeast-based magazine called Riot, and then many others. I mean, it kind of became very viral, spread everywhere. It also, as a result of that, also faced certain kind of backlash from Ambedkarite groups who accused me of appropriating a Dalit story and sort of for my own personal, whatever, gain or cultural capital. I don't think so. I've done it out of the deepest respect for Nangeli's story. I mean, what did I want to do it for is because I was moved, deeply moved by the story. And like I said, to me, whether it was actually true, did not happen, there is no document, all that didn't really matter to me. The fact that people tell that story is good enough for me. So I would tell the story that people tell. And so yeah, that's how it was, and it did make a lot of. It appeared in a lot of places, and it did shock and confuse people a lot. But that's how, yeah.
Your works throughout your career have always been very political, outrightly political. Every artist, of course, was political still. So, how do you choose subjects? Can I ask why is it always political?
Well, actually, uh, depends on how you define politics. We know from the time of the earliest of feminist movements that the personal is the political. And I don't, I mean, a lot of people know my work through what I put out on social media and on digital and platforms, and it always spreads around a lot. And so a lot of people know my work through that. That's only one strand of my work. I do large scale murals. I do shows in galleries. I of course make comic books. So I work in a variety of media. A lot of this is known, but not so much as my posts on social media. So when I started putting out things on social media, it was maybe around the time when it looked like 2012, 13, when it was looking like the Modi government is going to come to power, and they were becoming very and I was shocked at the kind of support they were getting, even from people I thought were largely sort of liberal minded. I suddenly saw that people were, and I understood something about the nature of power. That people are attracted to power. They may oppose you up to a point, or they may take principled positions up to a point. But if they see the lure of power, they can easily change their mind. So that's when I was like, I need to oppose this. And till then, I had never been like a cartoonist or somebody doing something for a newspaper or a journal, like a political cartoon as such. But I always wanted to do that. And I used to do that where we run this place called People Tree, which is a place where we sell t-shirts, we design and make things. I used to use the t-shirts for that. I used to make these very single frame cartoon like images with comments about society or politics and put them out on t-shirts. And but when I got into social media, and I realized the potential of it, that it was like my own newspaper in which I have no editor. I am the one who decides which cartoons will come, how many times they will come, and I will create the cartoons. And I have nobody to tell me this is too dangerous, this is not right, you cannot say this anymore. So I took full freedom of that. And it coincided with the rise of Modi. But not that I did it only because of that. I mean, River of Stories is a deeply anti-government work, and I did that in '94. So to me, it's not like I'm opposed to only Modi. I'm opposed to authority, to government, to fundamentalism, to majoritarianism. And so here was an opportunity for me to do this and put it out and reach a wide audience. So as I started doing it, the audience kept growing, and I was like, the other side of not having an editor is that there's no way to tell you that you're crossing the line. When you yourself make something, you don't know whether is there an invisible line that you have crossed. You have to judge yourself. So when that Wendy Doniger's book was pulped by Penguin on the basis of some threat from some obscure right-wing group, that's when I realized, man, if Penguin is going to shut up because of this, then who's going to speak? So I figured, look, I am an educated upper caste male in the mainstream. I have certain amount of, I'm also, I have certain kind of social capital, let's say. At least I can understand that my Muslim friend feels scared to speak up now. But I should do it. No, I mean, at least I have certain safeguards which many others don't have. And that's when I started doing it more and more. And of course, in the beginning, there's a lot of people who are scared. I mean, my family, friends, everybody saying, "What are you doing? You're going to get into trouble." I'm like, I have to do this, and we'll see how far it goes or what happens. It used to be scary also, but I always felt that if you start censoring yourself, then that's where you're going down the hill. So I said, I'm not going to censor myself. If I feel like that this has to be said, I will say it, and I will make work. And the more it kind of grew, and it's almost like the medium of social media kind of it brought out a different style of visual for me. I mean, it's like a different. That's what I'm saying. That it's different from my other work. Not that my other work is not political, but this is political in a very direct and very uh, on the moment kind of a way. I'm responding to things that are happening around me with an immediacy. Uh, so that brought out a whole different side, because then also uh, mm, I realized that I can kind of, because it's coming out of a kind of anger. But that anger is, if I just keep it inside, it'll just keep on. It'll become like poison. I won't be able to do anything. So I have to take it out. I have to put it out. Nobody's paying me for this. I'm in fact putting myself out in some danger for this. I should limit it. If I have something to say, whatever I have to create in half an hour, put it out, finish, and then get back to whatever I'm actually supposed to do. So in that half an hour, I evolved a style which uses photo collage, some drawing, some text, some scribbling. Again, is something I like doing. I mean, mixing up mediums, and So, and it allowed me to do something quickly within half an hour, 1 hour maximum. I would make something, put it out. And it became natural for me to think of that anger has to get distilled into a humor. Uh, Otherwise, it'll kill you from inside. And so, to me, humor is the thing. I mean, people often just laugh at it and go on. But behind the laughter is a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and it comes out of that. But I feel if I can translate that anger, frustration into laughter, then we can carry on. It's a sustainable process.
So, how powerful is humor in an increasingly autocratic?
It's becoming more and more powerful. It is becoming the one thing that's going to keep us sane, and that we have to employ. And it's the one thing that that always, provided your humor is to the point and good, it will always bite. It'll always bite. And my thing is not just against the so-called leaders. My thing is against the vast mass of people who actually are even subconsciously subscribing to those ideologies. As I told you, I'm many people in my own kind of friends, communities, and others who I realize are deep down do support. They may not say it, but they do support this kind of a majoritarian regime. My work is aimed at all of them, also more so, because those people are up there. They can be thrown out anytime, but the poison that is spreading in our society, that is much more dangerous. I mean, that is something that can't easily be rooted out.
So, in an age of memes and trolls, how does a cartoonist operate?
I think I've learned a lot from memes also. Memes is a new form of cartoon, I would say, except that it's a multimedia form, and it's a very interesting. I mean, memes don't have necessarily even a single point of authorship origin. They just spread, and with each spread, they actually transform, and somebody adds something more to it, and somebody adds. So it is like a collectively created thing that can have many lives, that can go on. And the same basic meme can go from representing politics in America to feminism in Iran to something in somewhere, or even just everyday boyfriend girlfriend issues, whatever. Those are very flexible. They're like packets of meaning which you can keep on adding to it, transforming it, changing it. So to me, I've learned a lot from the way people make meaning, and these are not artists or cartoonists or trained people. They're just random normal people who use that. So I learn a lot from that. You know, the way they just some random person does something with an image. But at the same time, there is a difference between what I do and what memes, obviously, because I'm thinking through, and my work is not amenable to that kind of change. It's not going out there saying, okay, now you can change this meaning, do this, do this. But people do, there is a limit, because people do share my work in different contexts. So somebody will, what happens with my work is that people find it gets shared a lot because people find, oh, this is something we want to say, but we don't know how to say. And here's the device which will communicate our feelings, which is why people share my work. But then they will share it with their own commentary or their own text or their own subtext or whatever it might be. Sometimes they even crop out certain things they don't like and use certain parts of it or whatever. I really have no control, which is okay as an artist. I mean, this is when Roland Barthes said in the 60s that about the death of the artist. Now it's truly there. I mean, artist is not only dead, but also dissected and cut into pieces and thrown. So that's okay. That's fine. I try to exercise some. I tell people, if I come across, I say, you can't mutilate my work. You know, you should. If you want to say something, say it. You want to use my work as part of it, use it, but respect it for what it is. I tell people, but I know it's just a futile thing. People will do whatever they want. So I'm okay with that. Once I put out something online, I have no more control on it.
In many of your works, there seems to be a very specific attention on the space as such. For instance, the Mapusa market work and the work that you displayed in Kochi Binale in 2016.
Yes.
And the Charminar thing.
Yeah.
And even Narmada Valley.
Yeah.
The space and the spatiality.
Yeah.
So how does it, as an artist, how does it come to your work? What's your
Again, I think maybe it has something to, now, not that I did that consciously, but when I look back at my work over the years, you're quite right in noting that there is a sort of deep connection with spatiality. I think now when I look back, I wonder maybe it comes from the fact that I'm a map maker's son, and I used to travel with my father sometimes on his cartography trips. He was always out on tour, so he'd be back home for a short time, again go on tour. So in some time it happened to be during our holidays, and he was not going to go very far. Then we brothers would go with him, and so I learned a lot about. To me, geography became kind of enmeshed with the idea of stories. Like we walk through the day, and my father has this particular process of the way he walks, and he takes a particular kind of step, which is exactly 33 inches. Uh, each step is 30. He's trained to do that. So when he's measuring a distance between one place and another, he just walks from that place to that place, and he counts the number of steps, and then he calculates the distance based on that. So in a way, I would say that. No, I mean, I'm just giving that example. Walking with him through landscapes, and then watching that becoming slowly transformed into a map through his calculations and his topographical measurements and everything. That to me, maps have became a way of storytelling. I mean, because when I see maps now, I can't see maps. I always imagine the landscape that behind that map, because that connection for me is very strong from childhood. So perhaps that is an important thing. Why I became so concerned with the idea of place and with, in a way, making maps. But to me, the maps, the kind of maps that he made, uh, were like God's eye view. It's like this omniseeing eye which sees everything. Uh, to me, what I wanted to add to those maps are the other points of view. What does that geography look like from the ground, not just from up there in the sky? What are the other things that happen, the houses, the people, the encounters with life, and those things? I want to add the stories to his maps in a way. And I guess that's how I evolved this kind of a style and concern. Yeah, and to me, geography is like critically important. I always research it. I never do a story of anything where I have not been. As I was mentioning, the Nangeli. I mean, I drew upon my memories of Kerala, even though the stories about Nangeli, to me, those background details, the landscape, the trees, the fauna, all of that, the color of the water, it's all from memories that I have. Uh, so yeah, to me, place is like is the vessel within which the story happens. So if you don't have the vessel, I think the story has no place to actually settle or create or come alive.
Is there any difference when you approach as an artist to public art and an artwork that is getting displayed in an elite gallery space like Kochi Mercedes Biennale or any international art show? Is there any difference in the approach?
No, because I think all my work I approach it as though it were public art. I don't care if it's in a gallery or whatever. Okay, Kochi Biennale is not really an elite gallery in the sense everybody goes there, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to show my work there. So I was very happy when they invited me, because I think it's the one kind of gallery show which is so accessible to the public, and the public is accessing it. It's not just that so many people are coming in there. There also I created a game based installation because I wanted people to interact. I wanted to see how people respond to the idea of art, and so I was very nervous first few days. I used to stand there and watch whether people are going to play, or there's so much to see, will they have time to stop and play something? But people started playing from day one, and it was amazing to see them play. And it confirms my basic sense that art ultimately is a form of play, uh, and that we humans always looking for opportunity to play. Maybe in the hurly burly of life, when we become adults, we have families, we have responsibilities, blah blah. Play kind of fades away in the background in our lives. But moment you offer people an opportunity to play, they will take it. This is what I learned from the Kochi Biennale. And so I would say no, all my work is always aimed at the public, even if it's showing in a gallery. And it has so happened that I used to initially not even care about galleries. I never approached any. Or then slowly galleries started approaching me. I still don't find the gallery as the best place to show art or as the ideal situation to show art. To me, much more public, interactive spaces are where art should be. Galleries are on the periphery of society, That's not where art should be. Art should be in the center of society. And again, in Palestine, when I traveled there, I saw this. I mean, people's work, there's no galleries. People's work is always, artists are always creating on the street. And when an artwork is created, the people of that area, they really own it, because for them, their reality is being pulled apart and destroyed. But the art is like a sort of a way to bring that thing back. It's like bring society back. It's almost like that phoenix, from the ashes it rises. So a bombed out building where the people have died or fled becomes a huge canvas and life comes back into it. So that is the power. I mean, we saw that in Shaheen Bagh. People were creating artworks everywhere. And the first thing the government, after disbanding the protest, the first thing they want to do is wipe out all the art. So the art is a very powerful medium. And that is why it should not be consigned to some white wall gallery where few people will go and see it. It has to be in the mainstream, and that is where I always wanted to be.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you
My
for
pleasure.
your time.